So, good evening. Today is Sunday, March the 1st of 2026, and it is right 8 p.m. Central Standard Time in Kansas City. And today's topic is really only the Iran war at the moment, with the United States and Israel basically trying to displace the current government, which has been in power since 1979. The Shiite clergy, basically the radical Islamists, to get them out of there. Now, there's an interesting factor is we don't want to talk tonight, or I don't want to talk about the military part of this whole thing, as this will play out here over the next days and weeks, and eventually you will see that the bombings from Iran will stop and there will be some form of a takeover coming. What is more of interest right now is the political opponents in Iran, which could actually topple the regime over there, who are or having boots, or who are the boots on the ground, so to speak. And the issue we're having, or what we're looking at, is what I really got surprised, or what took me by surprise, was the way the Western media is reporting about this, and how little Western politicians actually know of or about the opposition groups. And there's a reason behind this, and that is actually the topic of this video, to bring this down to a point. The whole story starts in the summer of 1967, just a few months before I was born. The Shah, or then Shah, visited with his wife Berlin, and while he was visiting there in an official visit, there were protests because the Shah was accused of human rights violation, of oppressing Shiite clergy. That was primarily Khomeini, the radical Islamists, as we had then afterwards we got to know them, and that kind of stuff. So the political left, the student opposition at that time, was basically protesting against the Shah while he was taking the parade down there in Berlin, wherever that happened. And the security forces started to get in altercations with these students, and that resulted in one of the students, Benno Ohnesorg, being shot by one of the police officers in that demonstration against the Shah, while he was present or shortly after he had gone through there. So that's basically the story. That started the 68 movement in Germany, and that caused the RAF, the German terrorist organization, to emerge out of this as a hatred for everything what the German state stood for at that point, the support of a monarch who was pro-American and anti-Islam. It looked at the time what he really was anti-radical Islam. And you couldn't tell these young students back then the difference between Islam and radical Islam. For these people, it was all Islam. It was just anti-religious. So that's how this whole movement was born. And these people, these extreme left-wing people in Germany, supported then Khomeini, and one of the German news journalists actually flew on the plane with Khomeini from Paris to Tehran in 1979, when they were revolutioning against the Shah. And it came to the takeover, and Khomeini took the position. And basically, that system was then installed with the aid of the ultra-left in Europe, not just in Germany, but in France and Italy. All these left and ultra-left-wing radicals, European radicals, supported Khomeini. And then Khomeini in 1989, the guy who just got killed yesterday by the American forces. Or, no, sorry, by the Israeli forces who did the aerial bombing and that stuff. Now, I was watching several news programs in Germany today from the official public broadcasters, and interestingly enough, they could not even state the fact that the Shah had a son. His name is Reza Pahlavi, and Reza Pahlavi lives here in the United States with his wife, and I think he got 3 daughters. And he is the one who is now trying to build an interim government to lead Iran not back into the monarchy days of his father, but rather into a democratic state with democratic institutions. And interestingly enough, not one of the German news outlets who reported on the opposition leaders or parties in Iran who can topple the current regime were ever capable of even mentioning that Reza Pahlavi, the Shah's son, is actually one of the driving forces behind it. And what is even worse in this whole thing, this is how painful this is to the European left, to these left-wingers, is the fact that Reza Pahlavi was actually invited to the Munich Security Conference 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he spoke there. And on that Saturday, when that Munich Security Conference happened, there were about 250,000 Iranian supporters of him, of the monarchy, of the Iranian monarchy, in Munich protesting, where he went then and he spoke. And if you're trying to find this in the German media, it is virtually impossible to dig this up because they completely suppressed this. That this is how riddled the left wing, the German left wing is, and how kaput they are, really mentally kaput, if it comes to actually dealing with the changes in Iran in a proper way, and with the Iran's or with the Shah's son being involved in the new interim government is something they cannot even comprehend, because that was the target group of their whole hatred and their whole opposition to our system, the Western system, was based on that, what happened there in June of 1967 in Berlin, when the Shah visited, the birth movement of the student revolution, the 68 revolution, all of it, what came with it, had their birth in it. And now that person who was the most hated person, the Shah back then, with his human rights violations, actually, they put a system in place which was even worse and more oppressive than what the Shah was accused of at that time in 1967. This is how kaput this whole thing is. You can't say it any other thing. In terms of mental, you can see this, and the mental kaputness, you have to really say this in Germany. Now, the worst part and the most shocking part of this was that the Christian Democratic politician, Laschet, Armin Laschet, came out. He is I think the chairperson of one of the committees in the Bundestag for foreign relations or something like this, and he does not even know what he's talking about. He has no clue what opposition forces they actually have they can support. He basically stated, yeah, we want now that the regime is going to be, regime change in there, because that's kind of what the United States want, and we don't want to say anything else. He didn't mention the Shah's son, Reza Pahlavi. He didn't say anything about the 250,000 pro-Iranian, pro-Shah demonstrators in Munich 3 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. None of this stuff. And this is now a Christian Democrat. From the socialists, I wouldn't expect anything, and I sure wouldn't expect anything out of the Green Party, and probably not out of the left-wing parties to begin with. All of this is going to be silenced. And the AFD, well, they're probably politically not educated enough to deal with any of this stuff. And they're probably too young to even remember what actually happened in 1967. So this is how mixed up this whole thing is. And here in the West, we have no clue, or at least the Western media has no clue of what people or what groups are going to be actually doing the regime change in Iran. And that is going to be because Reza Pahlavi is basically their leader. If you have 250,000 Iranian people in Munich 2 weeks ago supporting him publicly in a public demonstration in the city of Munich, and without the news media really reporting on this, this is like they completely put this, they put a, well, it doesn't exist, basically. They didn't report on it. It's like, well, we just don't say anything, then it's going to disappear, something like this. We can't say anything because the guy is a monarch. The guy is, this is the bad guy. This is the guy we fought against, and we brought someone in place, which was 100 times worse than the guy who was in there in the first place. But what the real story is behind this is that Reza Pahlavi is in the process of trying just to establish a interim government so they can go on and have elections and eventually set up Iran as a democratic republic as we have it here, in the Western world, to stabilize the Middle East altogether. That's basically where it is at. The other side of the coin is going to be the Ukraine-Russia war, because the Russians have heavily relied on weapons deliveries from Iran. And that weapons delivery is going to be completely coming to an end. And that means that the Russians will have a very difficult time, and they really have to put a lot more effort into it, of building their own drones and their own medium range or intercontinental ballistic missiles, whatever they needed there or needing, because the Iranian source is going to be dead for quite some time, or probably forever from this point on forward, because by the time the United States and Israel is done with their bombing campaigns, there's nothing going to be left of the defense sector in Iran. That is going to be good news for the Ukraine, because it will give the people in the Ukraine a badly needed respite from all the aerial attacks they have experienced. So this is kind of where that is at. So what we can expect to see here is that the son of the Shah, Reza Pahlavi, the crown prince basically, is going to be actively involved, and he's probably going to go over to Iran here sooner than later, and he will be actively engaging there in forming a transitional government with the pro-monarchists in Iran, and the pro-democratic groups, and the women's rights movement, and all of that stuff is going to come together, and they will, probably under his leadership, go into a direction of democracy in there. And the end of the deliveries of weapons, of drones, and what have you, from Iran to Russia. That's some good news there. Well, that's really all what sums it up, but I'm shocked and I'm ashamed of Germany, of their incapability of clearly seeing the history of what it really was, the mistakes the German left made by putting or helping actively to put Khomeini back then in 1978-79 into power. And then the reluctance to see that this was actually worse what they did and complicated the entire Middle East peace process because Khomeini's, support of Hamas, Hezbollah, and the other group there down in the Houthis, Houthis or something like this, that one group down there in close to in that the corner down there in Yemen. And you're looking at these things and you say, none of this is any good, this caused nothing but problems. 9/11, the two World Trade Center bombings were a result out of this. And the left could never come clean from this. This was their major accomplishment, having derailed the Shah, a monarchist, brought a monarchy to an end, who violated after they're compared to what they were saying were, anti-human rights institution. They're pro-American. We got to remember that was the time of the Vietnam War on top of it. So, and all of this stuff came together there, but they were never able to properly deal with that past. And now the opportunity is here. And now from the Christian Democrats all the way over to the far, far left, no one can say the right thing. No one knows what to do with this stuff. No one knows what the Shah's role was in there or his son. And where they're trying to go, this is like all just silence. There's just dead silence in it. And it is the ignorance, it's just unreal in this political ignorance. These politicians, what I've seen today in Germany, who publicly spoke out on television, are politically incompetent people. There's no question about it. They're politically incompetent. And they should not be in leading positions in political parties. That's my opinion. And with that, you have a great evening.